She was the youngest captain in human history. The galaxy laughed, until her name became the last thing their dying fleets ever whispered. They had written her off as a relic of war before she even drew her first breath. Humanity's long peace had stretched across centuries, and the academies no longer forged soldiers. They produced negotiators, bureaucrats, and trade liaisons. But somewhere deep in Earth's quiet corridors, the military still kept records. Records of worlds burned, empires shattered, and the cost in human blood. That history shaped her. Captain Arya Solane, barely 25 when she took command of the Resolute, the youngest starship captain in recorded human history. The appointment alone was scandalous across the Terran Directorate. Senators muttered that it was political theater. Admirals whispered that it was desperation disguised as progress. The alien observers in the Galactic Council laughed openly. What could a species of farmers, traders, and artists want with warships anymore? The truth was, Earth hadn't forgotten war. It had only been waiting. The Resolute was no relic. She was forged in silence, built from alloys no council had yet catalogued, wrapped in stealth that broke sensor logic. Her engines whispered across the void like a shadow. Every piece of her design screamed restraint and precision, not conquest, but that was what made her lethal. Arya stood on her bridge the way predators stood at the edge of waterholes, calm, patient, unshakable. Her crew followed her not because of her age, but because she carried that subtle, unsettling aura every death worlder did. The weight of someone who had grown up with storms that could rip cities apart, oceans that drowned fleets, and tectonics that swallowed civilizations. The galaxy had forgotten what it meant to fear humanity. And then came the incident. A colony whirled on the rim, Caloran 4. Peaceful, undefended. When the alien fleet descended, they didn't broadcast warnings or ultimatums. They simply cut communications, seized orbit, and began the purge. To them, it was routine. Species folded under shows of force. Resistance was rare, but Caloran 4 wasn't just another alien colony. It was human. By the time Earth received the fragmented distress signal, the ground was already burning. Civilians were herded into containment zones. The aliens moved with the efficiency of conquerors who had done this 100 times before. They expected silence, compliance, another forgotten world absorbed into their empire. What they got was the Resolute. Arya didn't wait for approval. She didn't assemble a fleet, didn't file reports for Senate debate. By the time the Directorate even confirmed the colony had fallen under attack, she was already in slipspace, her ship cutting toward Caloran 4 like a blade. On the bridge, her crew was silent, watching her with the quiet intensity soldiers give their commanders before battle. They knew the odds. One ship against an empire's expeditionary force. Suicide by every textbook written in the last 500 years. Arya only said 3 words before the jump finished. Peace is over. The Resolute tore back into real space above Caloran 4. The alien fleet hung there. 50 ships sleek, curved vessels bristling with weapons, their hulls marked with the sigils of the Phyrexian Dominion, one of the most disciplined, iron-fisted militaries in the galaxy. Entire systems had fallen before them without a shot fired. 50 ships. Against one. Alien comm channels lit with laughter. The humans had sent a single vessel? A captain child barely older than their academy initiates? The Dominion fleet commander didn't even bother arming his weapons. Instead, he hailed her, his voice dripping contempt. You stand before the Dominion. Human. Lower your shields. Surrender your vessel. And we may yet permit your colonists to live as subjects. Resist, and they will burn for your arrogance. Arya didn't answer immediately. She stood at the center of her bridge, eyes locked on the tactical display. 50 red markers against 1 blue. The silence stretched long enough for the alien commander to lean back in his throne, certain of victory. Then she spoke, her voice quiet, calm, but carrying that unyielding Terran steel. Tell your fleet to mark this day. You've woken something you don't understand. The channel cut. On the alien flagship, laughter rolled through the command deck. On the Resolute, Arya raised her hand. Engage! The first volley didn't come from the humans. It came from the Dominion. 50 ships lighting the void in synchronized fire, plasma and rail slugs screaming toward the lone Terran vessel. Every council-trained tactician knew what was supposed to happen. Shields collapse, hull fractures, reactor implodes. The end of the Resolute in a blaze of fire. That's not what happened. The alien fire vanished. Not absorbed, not deflected. Vanished. Their weapons screamed across space and hit nothing but cold vacuum. Sensors scrambled. Targeting systems spun blind. Trajectories bent as if the void itself rejected their assault. The Dominion commander rose from his throne in disbelief. What trick is this? It wasn't a trick. It was human engineering. A defense grid designed not to stop energy, but to erase its path. A technology Earth had never shared, never revealed. A weapon buried in archives for a war the galaxy thought humans had forgotten. Aria's lips curved, not into a smile, but something colder. Now it's our turn. The Resolute fired once. Not a spread, not a salvo, just one shot. A lance of compressed gravity, invisible to sensors until it bloomed. It didn't pierce the Dominion cruiser. It folded it, the metal crumpling into a sphere less than 100 meters across before detonating in silence. The Dominion fleet stopped laughing. On the colony below, human civilians looked up through the smoke of burning cities and saw a sight the galaxy hadn't seen in centuries. One Terran warship, standing against an empire. For the first time in generations, humanity wasn't peaceful. Humanity was awake. The Council's eyes watched her every move. Illyra's name had already spread like wildfire, the youngest captain in human history. Some called her reckless. Some called her untested. But none could deny she carried herself with the authority of someone born for command. Her first true test came only weeks after her promotion. The Resolute was patrolling the farthest edge of the Perseid expanse when a coded SOS broke through the silence. The signal wasn't human. It was Lyrani. Their empire had been neutral for centuries, distant, secretive, never part of human wars. The Lyrani were a crystalline race, fragile in body, but brilliant in science. For them to call humans for help meant something had gone catastrophically wrong. Decrypt it, Illyra ordered. The transmission played, fragmented, full of static, screams, explosions, and one repeated phrase, "They're burning the stars, they're burning the stars." A chill swept across the bridge. Lieutenant Oren, her tactical officer, leaned in. "Captain, that region borders Dominion space." The Dominion, humanity's oldest enemy. The insectoid war machine empire that had slaughtered colonies, butchered civilians, and pushed human fleets to the edge of annihilation. They were not supposed to be there. Treaties forbade it. But treaties meant nothing to predators. Illyra's jaw tightened. Set course. Maximum burn. The Resolute tore through slip space, every crew member knowing they were walking into a trap. When they arrived, the trap was already sprung. A Lyrani research station floated in ruins, its crystalline towers shattered into glowing shards drifting in the void. Around it, Dominion warships circled like vultures, massive spiked hulls bristling with weapons, feeding on the wreckage, firing on fleeing Lyrani ships for sport. Illyra didn't hesitate. Shields up, weapons hot. Her crew obeyed instantly. There was no room for doubt, not when every second meant lives lost. "Target the nearest destroyer," she said. The Resolute's main batteries roared, spearing through the void with beams of condensed plasma. The Dominion destroyer's shields flared, buckled, and shattered. A follow-up missile barrage ripped it apart in a silent inferno. The Dominion fleet turned, predator eyes locking on a single human vessel. Multiple ships moving to intercept. Oren warned. "Good," Illyra said. "They're looking at us. That means the Lyrani can escape." But the Lyrani weren't escaping. Their ships, delicate and unequipped for war, hovered in panic. They didn't know what to do. Illyra switched comms. "This is Captain Illyra Reyes of the Terran Navy. Form on my ship. Stay behind me. You'll live." For a moment, silence. Then one fragile crystalline cruiser moved, followed by others, clustering in her shadow like children hiding behind a shield. The Dominion moved in. 3 cruisers, 2 frigates, and a dreadnought. The Resolute was outnumbered, outgunned, and too far from human reinforcements. Illyra's voice never wavered. "Evasive maneuvers, pattern Delta 7. Oren, Focus fire on their frigates first. Break the pack. The Resolute danced through incoming fire. Ion bolts scorched the shields. Railgun slugs carved glowing scars across the hull. But the crew held steady. Every counter volley from Alera's ship was precise, surgical. The first frigate died fast. The second tried to flank, but she anticipated, swinging the Resolute's broadside cannons around and gutting it with a storm of plasma fire. The Lorani ships gasped across comms. Shock at human ferocity, at a single vessel daring to hold the line against monsters. But the dreadnought was still closing. It dwarfed them, a mountain of steel and chitin fused into a war beast. Its spinal cannon glowed, preparing to unleash a star-shattering beam. "Captain," Orin's voice was tight. Illyra's eyes locked on the monster. She didn't flinch. "All power to forward shields. Angle us directly at its cannon." The crew froze. To fly head-on into a dreadnought's gun was suicide. But Orin didn't question. The crew trusted her. The dreadnought fired. A lance of energy brighter than a sun carved through the void. The Resolute met it head-on. Shields screamed, cracking, collapsing layer by layer. The ship shook, metal shrieking, lights dying across decks. But the cannon's charge sputtered out before it could finish them. "Return fire," Illyra ordered calmly. The Resolute's main railgun answered, piercing the dreadnought's weakened core. The Lorani, emboldened, unleashed their own experimental energy lances. Together, human precision and alien science split the dreadnought in half. For the first time, Dominion ships pulled back. The monsters retreated. The battlefield fell silent, littered with Dominion wreckage and Lorani survivors. The crystalline alien sent a transmission, half awe, half disbelief. "Why? Why would you risk yourself for us? We are nothing to you." Illyra's answer was cold steel wrapped in fire. "Because humanity doesn't run from monsters. We hunt them." The Lorani would remember those words. But Illyra knew this was only the beginning. The Dominion wouldn't forgive. They had tasted her defiance. And predators always came back for the kill. The Seventh Fleet had bled in silence. 23 ships had been lost in the last week, and the enemy's pressure had only grown more ruthless. The alien coalition, KRYTH war clans, Volatile armadas, and scavenger mercenaries, had encircled human space in a tightening vice. They weren't fighting to cripple Earth's colonies. They were fighting to erase humanity from a galactic record. And at the center of the storm stood a single name repeated across every comm channel, friend and foe alike: Captain Arya Kalin. Her ship, the Resolute Dawn, had become a myth within weeks of deployment. Not because it was the largest or most advanced. It wasn't. Not because it carried secret weapons. It didn't. But because under her command, it had survived where others had perished, striking blows the enemy couldn't explain, carving escape routes from battles that should have been slaughterhouses. The crew whispered of her instincts, the way she seemed to know where enemy fire would fall, how she could predict the moment a ship's reactor would breach, how she never gave an order twice because the first time it was obeyed with absolute trust. But her legend was not what she sought. Arya carried the crushing weight of being the youngest captain in human history. And now the eyes of an entire species looked to her as the war slid toward its breaking point. The War Council gathered aboard the battered flagship Aegis Eternal. Generals, admirals, and colony leaders projected their holograms into the chamber. The walls flickered with static, a reminder of how fragile human communications had become. Seventh Fleet is down to 40% operational strength. One admiral reported grimly. Eighth Fleet is scattered. If we don't hold Proxima's line, the enemy will have an open corridor to Earth. The chamber filled with grim silence. Earth, the birthplace of humanity, the heart of everything they were. To lose, it would mean more than defeat. It would mean extinction. A general broke the silence. We need a delaying action. A fleet sacrifice, if necessary. Someone must hold the line long enough for the colonies to evacuate key populations. Eyes turned to the few surviving captains present. Some looked away. Some clenched their jaws. Everyone knew what was being asked. Volunteers for a suicide stand. It was Arya who spoke, her voice cutting through the chamber like steel. "Give me the Dawn. Give me what's left of my task group. We'll hold the line." The silence deepened. No one had wanted to hear it from her. the girl barely out of academy uniforms, the prodigy who had risen too quickly. But the truth burned in her eyes. She wasn't offering bravado. She was stating a fact. Admiral Veros leaned forward in his chair, his scarred face hard as stone. "You're asking to take 4 ships against a coalition armada." "Yes," Arya replied, "because if we wait, the enemy will strike Proxima with everything. We'll be outnumbered no matter what we do. Better they bleed themselves against us, while Earth prepares." A counselor snapped, "You'll be throwing away lives." Arya didn't flinch. "Better ours than the billions behind us. Humanity didn't survive extinction events on one world to fall meekly in the stars. If they want Earth, they'll have to burn through us first." The chamber erupted with voices, arguments, accusations. But in the end, the council voted, not because they believed she could win, but because they knew someone had to buy time, and no one else had the resolve to step forward. Arya Kalen had just volunteered to become humanity's shield. The Resolute Dawn drifted in formation with 3 other survivors of her command: the destroyer Iron Spark, the frigate Wraith, and the medical corvette Haven's Grace. For ships against hundreds, the crew knew what they were marching into. And yet, there was no hesitation, because every soul aboard knew their captain would not waste them needlessly. In the silence of her quarters, Arya traced her hand over an old photograph of her family. She had never told anyone, but she carried the weight of their loss. Her colony had been one of the first wiped out in the war. That fire inside her had never dimmed. It had shaped every choice, every order, every gamble she'd taken since. Now it would shape the final stand. When the enemy armada arrived at Proxima's edge, they expected to find human fleets in retreat. Instead, they found a Resolute Dawn waiting for them, weapons hot. The KRYTH warlord leading the armada snarled at the audacity. "One ship dare stand before us?" Then the destroyer and frigate decloaked beside her, followed by the corvette emerging from the gas giant's shadow. For tiny lights against the storm, the alien commander laughed. "Crush them. Let the humans learn the futility of resistance." What followed was not futility. The Dawn moved like no other vessel in the war. Arya anticipated the enemy's firing solutions before they were executed, slipping her ship through salvos that should have shredded it. She baited the KRYTH into overextending, then ordered Wraith to strike their flank. She coordinated the Iron Spark's guns with surgical precision, cutting supply ships from the formation before the aliens realized they were being targeted. Every minute she bought was a miracle. Every enemy ship she crippled was time stolen for Earth. But it wasn't enough. The aliens adapted. Their numbers pressed harder. The Haven's Grace took a torpedo and vented half her decks into space. The Iron Spark went down in flames, buying seconds for the others to escape crossfire. The Resolute Dawn fought on, battered, shields failing, hull scorched. Still, Arya did not relent. She activated the ship-wide comm. Every crew member heard her steady voice. "They will write of this day, not because we survived, but because we stood. Hold nothing back. Humanity lives in the seconds we steal. And if this is our end, then let it be one they will fear for centuries." The crew roared in answer, not despair, defiance. As the Resolute Dawn closed in on the KRYDH flagship, Arya's eyes narrowed. This was it. The last card. "Ram sequence," she ordered. The bridge went silent. Then the crew obeyed. No hesitation. No argument. The ship surged forward, engines burning past safety limits. Alien fire ripped into the hull, tearing decks apart, but the Dawn did not falter. Arya stood tall, eyes fixed on the enemy flagship, the youngest captain in human history, leading humanity's final stand. The Resolute Dawn struck like a blade to the heart of the armada. The explosion consumed both ships, a detonation so bright it lit the void like a second star. The alien fleet faltered. In that moment of shock, human reinforcement arrived, late but not too late. Inspired by Arya's sacrifice, the scattered fleets rallied, hammering the coalition into retreat. Humanity survived Proxima, and across the stars, one name was etched into legend: Captain Arya Kalen, the youngest captain, the one who stood when no one else would, the one who proved that Deathworlders do not break, they blaze. The battlefield was no longer a place. It was a memory written into the hulls of ships, into the silence between stars, into the trembling voices of those who had seen too much and yet still fought. Captain Alara stood on the command deck of the Resolute, a ship once thought too old for war, now carrying the weight of an entire species. Around her, the crew operated like clockwork, their exhaustion tempered by the raw will that only humans could summon at the edge of extinction. The enemy fleet had regrouped. They had lost heavily in the first clashes, underestimating the child captain as they called her, but they had returned with vengeance, burning fuel and lives alike to crush the defiance that had humiliated them. Thousands of alien ships now blotted out the stars, engines glowing with menace, weapons primed to reduce humanity's last line of defense into ash. Alara studied the tactical display. Her fleet, patched together from whatever humanity still had, looked pitiful against the overwhelming swarm. Numbers screamed impossibility, logic demanded retreat, yet humanity had nowhere left to run. Earth had been scarred, its skies still thick with the dust of invasion. Colonies had fallen silent, entire worlds reduced to ruins. This was not a battle of fleets. It was survival itself. "Signal the fleet," Alara said quietly. Her voice was steady, but her hands, hidden behind her back, curled into fists. "Tell them we do not yield. Not now. Not ever." The calm officer hesitated only a fraction before nodding. The words were transmitted across the armada, bouncing from frigate to destroyer to battleship. A spark in the void. On dozens of bridges, pilots and gunners straightened. Across engineering bays and med wards, weary eyes lifted. The youngest captain in history was no longer just a commander. She was a reason to keep fighting. The enemy hailed. Their warlord's face filled the main view screen, a reptilian maw twisted into what passed for a smile. His voice rumbled like stone breaking. "Child, surrender your fleet. Humanity's story ends here, under the weight of inevitability. Your kind was always fragile, an accident of survival. Stand down and I will grant you mercy." The bridge crew stiffened. The word mercy was an insult, not an offer. Alara stepped forward. Her gaze locked onto the alien's unblinking eyes. "Fragile," she said softly. "We built fire in the dark with nothing but stone and hunger. We crossed oceans with sails against storms. We buried our dead and kept walking forward. You think survival was an accident." She shook her head. "Survival is the only thing we've ever known." The alien hissed, but she cut the transmission before he could reply. "Bring us to attack posture," she ordered. The Resolute surged into formation, leading the fleet like a blade aimed at the heart of inevitability. Human ships powered forward, engines screaming, guns charging. The void lit up as the alien armada advanced, a tidal wave of destruction. The first volley shook the stars. Entire cruisers were gutted in single strikes, debris scattering like ash. Fighters darted like hornets, cutting through the swarm with impossible maneuvers, many never returning. Destroyers traded fire at suicidal ranges, tearing each other apart. The battle dissolved into chaos. Ships colliding, dying, exploding in blossoms of white fire. On the Resolute, alarms blared as the hull trembled under impact. Shields flickered, plating buckled. Still, Alara stood tall. "Target their carriers," she commanded. "Break their wings." Human squadrons obeyed, diving through impossible gaps, threading firestorms to strike at the massive alien carriers. Explosions rippled across the void as one by one. The carriers erupted, vomiting wreckage and flame. The enemy swarm faltered, disoriented, but the price was blood. Ship after human ship went dark. Alara watched the icons fade on the tactical display, each one a world of lives extinguished. Her throat tightened, but she forced her voice steady. "Keep pushing." The alien warlord's flagship loomed ahead, a fortress bristling with weapons. It dwarfed the Resolute, a leviathan against an aging predator. The crew knew what Alara intended before she spoke. "We break them here," she said. "Ram formation. Open a path." Gasps filled the bridge. Ram formations were ancient, desperate. Ships sacrificed themselves to carve through enemy defenses. But no one protested. Humanity had always written its victories in sacrifice. The fleet obeyed. Ships surged ahead. throwing themselves into the alien line. Explosions cleared the way, hulls torn apart, crews burning their last breath to make a corridor of fire. The Resolute plunged forward through the gap, straight toward the warlord's flagship. Weapons pounded the human vessel. Decks tore apart, bulkheads collapsed, fires raged in corridors. Crew fought not only the enemy but the dying of their own ship. Still, the Resolute advanced. Illyra's eyes never left the massive alien vessel. Charged the main gun. Overloaded. Her weapons officer's hands froze. "Captain, that'll tear us apart." "It'll tear them apart first." The crew obeyed. The Resolute's spinal cannon glowed brighter and brighter, energy overloading beyond design. Systems failed, consoles sparked, but the charge built like the fury of a dying star. On the view screen, the alien warlord watched, realization dawning. He roared orders, but it was too late. "Fire," Illyra whispered. The cannon released. A beam of pure annihilation cut through the void, tearing into the enemy flagship. Shield shattered, armor split, and for a heartbeat, silence held the universe. Then the alien vessel detonated in a chain of explosions so vast the shockwave lit distant asteroids. The Resolute staggered, its own systems collapsing under strain. Fires consumed its decks. The hull breached in half a dozen places. The ship was dying, but it had killed a god. The enemy fleet broke. Leaderless, reeling, they scattered into chaos. Human ships, bleeding and battered, pressed the advantage, driving the invaders into retreat. The tide had turned, not by numbers, not by strength, but by the will of one captain who refused to yield. On the burning bridge, Illyra steadied herself against a ruined console. Smoke choked the air. Sparks rained. Around her, survivors clung to their stations, refusing to abandon their posts. "Status?" she rasped. "Enemy flagship destroyed." Came the answer through static. "Fleet in retreat. We've won." The word fell unreal, too fragile for the moment. But as it spread through the comms, as voices echoed across the fleet, it grew into something undeniable. Humanity had survived. The youngest captain in history stood at the center of it all, her ship collapsing around her, her name already etched into legend. For generations to come, children would learn of the day when a human child faced a void and taught the galaxy what survival meant. They would speak her name with reverence, not because she was the youngest, but because in humanity's darkest hour, she had made them eternal.